Hi folks, it's me back again with another video. So in this video, like I mentioned in the last video, we're gonna do a somewhat of a detailed comparison between the enameled cast iron skillet and a good quality stainless steel skillet or frying pan. Now in this video specifically, we're gonna look at the Le Creuset enameled cast iron, and we're gonna put it up against the Demeyere Proline. But what I'm going to say here also pretty much more or less applies to other good quality enamel cast iron and also stainless steel frying pans. Now, in the last couple of videos, I said that if you put a enamel cast iron frying pan up against a good quality stainless steel pan, it's very difficult for the enamel cast iron pan to compete. Now, that's because as a starting point, neither pan is non-stick, okay? And on top of that, the stainless, it offers you a few more advantages, like more even heating, faster response, and in some cases, like the Proline, because it's very thick, you also get better heat retention and also potentially better longevity because there is no coating on the stainless, whereas there is a coating on the enamel cast iron. But in this video, we're going to look at it in a little bit more detail. And before we do that, I'll actually show you this 30 centimeter Le Creuset enamel cast iron in the cayenne color. So I got this on a clearance deal, but I had to wait almost a month to actually for it to actually arrive. So as you can see, well, if we look at it like this, so this is the 23 centimeter, this is the 30. So obviously the 30 centimeter is, well, significantly larger. Now, I haven't actually used it yet, but you can see it's it's very nice. It's in the cayenne color. And this is what it looks like. So in the end, I'm going to sell one of these, okay? I just don't need that many enamel cast iron pans. So I think after all this is done, this one is probably going to have to go. Okay, right. Okay, so let's get started. So in terms of the construction, let's quickly talk about that first, right? Cast iron is just cast iron, or all cast iron frying pans, or in fact, all cast iron pans are made the same way. Now, the difference between with enamel cast iron, the difference between a cheap enamel cast iron skillet and a more expensive enamel cast iron skillet is most likely just the quality and the potential longevity of the enamel. So Le Creuset, they do a very good enamel, and they charge a higher price for that accordingly, of course. So a good quality pan like the Le Creuset is likely going to give you better durability and better longevity on the enamel than a cheaper enameled pan. But also, that's not something that you can see straight away. You know, it'll probably take you at least a year, maybe half a year, or even more to actually see the benefit of that. Now, with the stainless, the construction can vary significantly, right? So there's just not enough time in this video to talk about all of that. And we're only going to focus on fully cladded pans just in this video. But with stainless, as you may be aware, you get 3-ply, 5-ply, where you get a layer of aluminium in between 2 layers of stainless steel. With 5-ply, you either get 3 layers of aluminium in between 2 layers of stainless steel, or alternating layers of aluminium in between the stainless steel, depending how the manufacturer makes the pan. And of course, in the case of the Proline, you get 7 layers. So you got 3 layers of stainless steel, 3 layers of aluminium, and another layer of stainless steel here on top. And of course, also in some other pans, like the all-clad copper core, you get a layer of copper. Okay, so there's just too much to talk about all in this one video. Now, in terms of the size and weight of these pans, look, so the 23 Le Creuset is 23 centimeter Le Creuset is more or less kind of similar to the 24 centimeter Proline. I mean, the 24 centimeter Proline, it does look quite a bit bigger because it is higher, it is taller, and also it's got more sloped sides. Okay, but otherwise the cooking surface is not that much different. So here you get 18 centimeters of cooking surface, and here you get 19 centimeters of cooking surface. And that's kind of the same when comparing the 30 centimeter Le Creuset to the 28 centimeter Proline. So in the 30 centimeter Le Creuset, you get 24 centimeters of flat cooking surface, and in the 28 centimeter Proline, you get 23 centimeters of flat cooking surface. But just by looking at them, they're pretty much the same. They're pretty much the same size. Okay, let's quickly talk about weight. Now, 23 centimeter Le Creuset, on my scale at least, it weighs 1,892 grams. And the 24 centimeter Proline, you get 1,765 grams, so about 100 grams lighter. Now, the 30 centimeter Le Creuset, it's 3,078 grams, so just over almost exactly 3 kilograms. And with a Proline 28 centimeter is 2,376 grams. Okay, so just for a bit of comparison. Okay, so next we're going to do a kind of a detailed analysis, and then we're going to look at the heating performance, comparing the Le Creuset Enamel Cast Iron and the Demeyere Proline. Okay, so here we are. Let's do somewhat of a detailed comparison. Now, you can either just pause the video and look at this table, or you can listen to me talk for a couple minutes. So I've split this into 10 categories. I've assigned a maximum score of 5 for each category, so that gives us a maximum possible score of 50. And we're going to look at the Le Creuset Enamel Cast Iron. We're going to look at a typical 3 to 5 ply stainless pan, so typical average around, say, 2.6 millimeters, like the Orclad. And we're going to look at the Demeyere Proline, very thick at 4.8 millimeters. Okay, so let's go through the 10 categories. Okay, so first up, we have non-stick. Now, I've given a score of 2 out of 5 for all of these pans because none of them is by nature non-stick. Now, this is a whole other topic, so I'm not going to talk too much about it here. But if you know what you're doing, if you know how to use these pans, you will not have a problem at least 90 to 95% of the time. Now, the other 5% of the time, when you're cooking a fried egg or delicate fish, you can also achieve non-stick with a bit of technique, okay? So I don't see that as a big issue at all. Now, second, heat distribution, or how even does the pan heat? Well, cast iron, it doesn't heat very evenly by nature, so we're going to give it a 2.5. My experience with a typical 3-ply and the Demeyere is that the thicker Demeyere heats a little bit more evenly. So we're going to give 3.5 to the typical 3 to 5 ply because it does heat better than cast iron. And for the Demeyere, we're going to give it a slightly higher score of 4.5. Now, number 3, responsiveness. So again, cast iron is not that responsive, all right? So we're going to give it a 2.5 out of 5. A 3 to 5 ply pan around 2.6 millimeters thickness. It is, yes, pretty responsive. Okay, so we're going to give it a 4. And for the Demeyere Proline, well, it's thicker, so it's got more thermal mass, so which means it's going to take longer to respond to heat changes. So we're going to give that a 3. Okay, so maybe that's even a little bit generous. It could even be a 2.5 because of how thick it is. Now, number 4, heat retention. Cast iron is pretty good at heat retention. It's not as good as people think it is. You know, companies that sell cast iron will always market it as is the best retainer of heat. But most people don't realize that if you have a thick stainless steel pan, it's going to retain heat a lot better than cast iron. So if you compare cast iron to a typical 3 to 5 ply stainless, it'll retain heat, a little bit better. So that's why we've given it a score of 3.5 versus 3. And in terms of fully clad fry pans, nothing retains heat better as far as I know compared to the Demeyere Proline. So we're going to give the Proline a score of 4.5. Now, long-term durability. This is category number 5. They're all pretty good, okay? They're all pretty good. But the enamel cast iron, it does have a coating, so it can be prone to getting scratched or chipped or or degraded if you're not careful. But it is still much better than a non-stick pan with a Teflon coating. Okay, so we're gonna give that a 3.5. And for the two stainless steel pans, the typical thickness and a much thicker Proline, we'll give them both a score of 4.5. And that's because if you don't abuse them or do anything stupid, they should, in theory, last almost indefinitely. Okay. Now, structural integrity. This is category number 6. What I mean by structural integrity is that what's going to happen to the pen if you accidentally drop them or do something stupid or something like that, right? Now with cast iron, because cast iron is by nature somewhat brittle, so if you drop it on a hard surface, it could potentially break or crack, okay, and you don't want that. So that's something you got to be careful of. So we're gonna give cast iron a score of 3. We're also going to give a score of 3 to the typical 3 to 5 ply, and that's because if you're not careful, if you leave it on the stove for too long, if you accidentally overheat it far too hot, or if you use let's say a burner that's way small to the pan, it could potentially warp. Okay, so that's the danger with the stainless, a thinner stainless. So we're also going to give that a 3. And we're going to give a score of 4 out of 5 for the Demeyere Proline. That's because it is just that much thicker. So it is more less susceptible to warping than a typical 3 to 5 ply pen. But that still doesn't mean you can abuse it or do something stupid. It's just that it's a little bit less prone to warping than a thinner pen, so we're going to give that a score of 4. Now, versatility, well, you can cook anything in any of these pans, okay? So, yeah, so I think there's not too much to talk about here. You can use them for basically whatever you like. They are also quite safe in the oven, so we're going to give a score of 4.5 for all 3 pans. Now category number 8, ease of use and cleaning. Well, they're all pretty good. It's just that with the enamel, you just got to be a little bit careful that you don't damage the enamel. Don't scratch it with metal utensils, or don't go in really hard with a metal spatula. But otherwise, I think they are pretty good. So we're gonna give a score of 3.5 for the enamel cast iron, and a score of 4.5 to the 2 stainless pans. Now with the stainless pans, they are very easy to clean if you just know how to use them. Okay, so they are far more easier than let's say a Teflon non-stick. Okay, price. Again, price is, in my opinion, I think it makes far more sense to buy these than the non-stick pans. So these are long-term investments. So over the long term, it'll work out much cheaper than buying a non-stick pan every year. And also they are reasonably priced, depending on the regions of the world. So we're gonna give a score of 3.5 to both the enamel cast iron and the typical 3 to 5 ply stainless, and we're going to give a score of 3 to the Proline, and that's just because in the EU, like I always say, these sell at very reasonable prices. I would buy them straight away in a second without hesitation. Outside of the EU, it's very difficult to get a Proline at a bargain price. Okay, so you're really gonna have to get your wallet out if you want to buy the Proline outside the EU. Now, the last category is something that most people don't think about, but I do think it's important, and that is value retention. So if there comes a point in time where you have to sell your cookware because you are moving house or moving countries or whatever, then if you get good quality stainless steel pans, good quality enamel cast iron, they should retain at least 40 to 50% of their value. Now, in the case of Proline or Demeyere Atlantis, they should be able to retain even 60% of their value. So I've given it a score of 3 out of 5 for the cast iron, 3 out of 5 for the standard 3 to 5 ply, and a score of 4 out of 5 for the Demeyere Proline or the Atlantis. Now, I'll give you a perfect example of that, right? I bought a piece of Demeyere Atlantis from a store in Belgium for, I can't remember how much it was. I think it was 200 euros or something like that. So I took it back to New Zealand with me, and I sold it, and I got an even higher price than what I paid for it brand new back in Belgium. Now, that's just because the price of the Atlantis or the Proline is so much more expensive here. So the price that I sold it for here, it sounds ridiculous that I sold it for even more than I got it new. But hey, that's a fair market price for the market in New Zealand. So people are still happy to pay for that price, pay that price. So just something also to keep in mind when you're buying these pens. Okay, so let's quickly summarize. The enamel cast iron gets a total score of 29.5 out of 50. The 3 to 5 ply stainless gets a total score of 33.5, and the Proline, it gets a total score of 36.5. So as you can see, none of these are bad options. Okay, so they're all pretty good. But if from this table, we can see that, well, at least in my opinion, that the stainless, it does a little bit better compared to the enamel cast iron. Okay, so let's have a look at the heating performance for the Le Creuset and the Proline, and we're going to look at the smaller pans and the larger pans. Okay, so we'll compare the 23 centimeter Le Creuset versus the 24 centimeter Proline, and we're also going to compare the 30 centimeter Le Creuset versus the 28 centimeter Proline. So now, as I always say, regardless of the type of burner you have, if you want the most even heat distribution, you have to try to heat your pan slow. Okay, so in both these cases, I heated the pan on a setting of 6 out of a maximum possible setting of 9. Okay, so let's start with the smaller pans. Now, as you can see in the table, I measured the temperature difference between the center and the edge, and of course also how long it took to reach a certain temperature. Now in this case, both pans did pretty well. The maximum temperature difference between the center and the edge by the end of the test for the Le Creuset was about 30 degrees, and the Proline managed to keep the temperature difference actually below 15 degrees. Okay, so that's quite nice to see. Now, what you will notice is that I'm going to zoom in here on the graph. Now, the Proline, it heated significantly slower than the Le Creuset, right? And that's just because it has a lot more thermal mass than the Le Creuset, being 4.8 millimeters thick. So at this particular point, the Proline lags behind the Le Creuset by 2 minutes to reach the same temperature. This was at 150 degrees. And by the end of the test, the gap widened to almost 3 minutes. Okay, so 170 seconds longer it took for the Proline to reach the same temperature as the Le Creuset. Okay, so this is for the smaller pans. Let's have a look at the larger pans. Now here, I was hoping the Le Creuset would do a little bit better, so I was a little bit, I guess, disappointed, I could say. So by the end of the test, this was on a bigger burner, by the way, obviously with bigger pans. So by the end of the test, the Le Creuset, the temperature difference between the center and the edge of the Le Creuset was about 50 degrees Celsius. Okay, so sorry, this is all in Celsius, by the way. And that 50 degrees, that was even me being a little bit generous, because at certain points around the edge, the temperature difference was actually as high as 65 or maybe even close to 70 degrees for the Le Creuset. The Proline, again, it did pretty well. The maximum, I mean, obviously, of course, with a bigger pan, I would expect a bigger difference between the center and the edge. But in this case, the Proline also did quite well again, and it kept the temperature difference by the end of the test to around 20 degrees, which is, I guess that's quite negligible during in everyday practical cooking. Okay, so if we again have a look at the graph, well, as you would expect, again, the Proline heated much slower than the Le Creuset. It's kind of a similar trend to the first graph. This is the center temperature, and by the end of the test, the Proline was actually, in this case, exactly 3 minutes behind the Le Creuset. Okay, now in terms of pricing, look, it's very difficult to compare the prices of all these pens worldwide, but where I used to live in the EU, they are kind of similar, okay? So the price of this pen is kind of similar to the price of this pen, and the price of this pen is kind of similar to the price of this pen. They all below 200 euros, and depending on what size you get. But I do notice where I used to be in the EU that there seems to be a lack of good options for the standard 3 to 5 ply pens. Okay, so it's not like in America where you've got many options for 3 ply pens, 5 ply pens. They don't seem to exist in the EU. Also, now if we're talking about the US, you've got literally so many options. You've got many retailers for Le Creuset, many retailers for other brands of or stainless pens, or many brands of stainless pens. So it's just too hard to compare, summarize all that in one video. But what I would say is that because I never pay full price for these things, and I don't think you should either. So if you want something, just wait for a good deal before actually pulling the trigger. Now, one thing I will say about the Proline is that in the EU you get these at very reasonable prices. So which kind of makes me say that in the EU it makes a lot of sense buying the Proline. But outside the EU, they don't seem to go on sale very often or at all. Okay, so based on everything I've seen online, everything I've seen on YouTube, etc., it is very hard to get a good deal on the Demeyere, especially the Prolines. Right, so one more thing I want to talk about before we go to the conclusion, and that's actually the handles. Because I think it's quite important to mention the difference between the two types of pens. Now, with a cast iron pen, like all cast iron pens are made, so all of this, right, the handle, the pen, the helper handle, it's just all one piece. Okay, and you notice that on cast iron pens, the handle is always quite short. And this is because cast iron is quite a brittle material, so they are not really able to make the handle thin and long like you have on the stainless pen, because if it was like that, it could potentially break, especially if the pen is heavy and full of food. Okay, so that's why they make cast iron handles on cast iron pens quite short and a little bit wide, just to give it a bit more structural integrity. And that's the same with the helper handle here. Now, with all this being said, it does mean that again, it's because it's quite short and because it's one piece attached with the pen, the handle on cast iron pens, they tend to get hot quite quickly and quite easily. So if you got the pen sitting on the stovetop for, I don't know, maybe around 15 minutes or a bit longer, the handle, especially the short helper handle here, they will get quite hot, and it may no longer be comfortable for you to hold it just like this. So quite often you need a towel or some sort of insulating cover to prevent your hand from getting burnt. Now, you don't have this problem with stainless steel, right? Because with stainless steel, the handle, the pen, the helper handle, they are manufactured as separate pieces, and they are joined on the pen either by rivets or, in this case, welded. And also you have design features like this, which basically stops or significantly slows the heat transfer from the pen to the handle. So in practice, you will almost never have this problem with stainless steel, regardless of how long the pen is sitting on the stove. I've had stainless pens on the stove for hours, and the handle would never really get too hot to touch. Okay, so on to the conclusion. Look, to me, it's always been clear, long before I actually did this video, it's always been clear that stainless skillets have several technical advantages over cast iron, right? Regardless of it's enameled or regular cast iron or non-enameled. So to me, look, stainless steel is always going to be my go-to pan. And it has been my go-to pan for at least the last, I don't know, maybe six years. And it will most likely be my go-to pan for the foreseeable future. Maybe possibly indefinitely. Actually, my first two stainless steel pans were the stainless pans from IKEA. That was back in 2018, I think, when I was living in Europe. Got it from IKEA, and I used them for maybe a year and a half before I switched to the Proline. So look, it's like I also said, it's in a couple of my other videos. It's also not about which pan is technically superior. It's also about which pan that you will enjoy using more, right? So many people, millions and millions or even billions, they use cast iron just because they prefer cast iron, for no particular reason. They are either unaware that stainless is technically superior, or they could well be aware. But they just don't care, okay? So they use cast iron because they prefer cast iron. And that's perfectly fine as well, as long as you stay away from the Teflon non-stick stuff, basically anything else is good. So if you ask me personally what I would recommend if you were to go out now and buy a set of cookware, well, my approach would be get a set of stainless cookware and supplement it with one good cast iron or carbon steel pan that is not enameled. Okay, so that's the pan you would use if you're gonna cook delicate stuff like fried eggs or delicate fish fillets. But otherwise, you can do 90% of your cooking in stainless steel. So personally, that's what I would get. But having said that, I'm still yet to get myself a non-enameled carbon steel or cast iron pan just for that purpose. Because so far I just never really saw a need for it. I've been doing eggs and fish in stainless just fine as well. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that look, and I'll see you in the next video.